What's up, guys? Devil Dog Gamer here, and by popular demand, we are talking about the new M-60 in War Thunder. And you know, there's a lot of really cool things about this tank. It was the American main battle tank for the longest time, through Vietnam, Desert Storm, and you know, got finally phased out pretty recently. And it's used by a ton of our allies. But about the history of this tank. So in the 50s, the British got their hands on a T-54, and at the time they were looking for a new way, new main battle tanks. This is the time in the 50s, the Cold War was just starting up. Everybody was trying to make bigger and badder tanks. So the British finally got their hands on a T-54 and realized that their 20-pounder wasn't going to cut it anymore. So they decided to switch to the Royal Ordnance L7, which is a 105mm gun. Well, at this time, we were updating our M48 Pattons with, small stuff here and there, and we got wind of this and decided, you know what, the Brits figured it out, let's go ahead and grab the L7. So we grabbed the L7 and made a completely new Patton, which devolved into the M60, which is more, it's got quite a few differences from the M48 Patton. The M48 Patton was a little bigger, a little more rounded, while this has a little more flat spots on it, but became our main battle tank for the longest time. Variants from the M60A1 to the M60A3, which is used all over the place still. Egypt, Israel just got rid of all of theirs. Syria, Jordan, all over the place. These tanks are used still to this day everywhere. And they were good tanks. They were good tanks. They definitely had a lot of really good things going for them. It was the last U.S. tank to utilize homogeneous steel armor, and also the last one to have an escape hatch under the hull of the tank. A lot of people think that the Abrams has an escape hatch below it. It doesn't. There are plenty of modern tanks that do, but the Abrams is definitely not one of them. But the reason behind the escape hatch is because the driver's hatch could easily be blocked out by the turret, and you needed another way to get out. And that's where that came from. So it was, it had a lot of last for us. This is definitely the last tank before reaching the 21st century of tanks and really just getting into it and doing it. Now, the M60 platform, though, is used for a lot of things still. There's a lot of combat engineering vehicles, with big 162mm guns on it, capable of taking out, bunkers and stuff like that are still in service, along with bridge-laying tanks that use the M60 hull. So it's still around. It's definitely still around in our inventory. It was used in Desert Storm. It did see combat at the Kuwait airport, but other than that, it never really got a chance to really spread its wings and fly. It was used in Vietnam a lot. It was definitely, but I've heard of tank battles between like T-62s and this during Vietnam, but I really couldn't find any exact stories. But I've heard about it, and I'm sure it happened too. I'm sure on some jungle road somewhere, these two bastards met, But, tank, and it didn't really do that well in Vietnam because of the environment. They were not widely used because, tanks get, same with the 113. The 113 is a big tank in Vietnam, but it wasn't widely used because you take it into jungles, it's going to get stuck left and right, along with the fact that any fucking retard can get next to you with an RPG and 5 feet away from you and put it right in your side. So tanks weren't widely used, maybe more for defenses, from what I've read, that they were kind of hanging around combat outposts that were out in the middle of nowhere. They'd airdrop one in with the Chinook and just have it sit there for defense in case they got overrun. But, it's definitely had its upgrades over the years through the stabilizers, rangefinders, elevators. It's relatively stayed the same, though. It hasn't really changed much from the A1 to the M60, more just modernization and getting it up to date with current times and actual systems like IR and this retard. They're just like lemmings. And it definitely had a good run. It had a long run. Was used up to Desert Storm. Of course, the biggest battle that ever took place between tank and tank in modern day times is 73 Eastings, which this did not participate in. Unfortunately, that would have been a last great hurrah for it. But it's definitely had its way. It did very good in the 6-Day War with the Israelis. There are definitely some stories of actual Egyptian M60s versus Israeli M60s, which is pretty crazy. But it was generally an all-around good tank. It didn't really have you know, much complaints about it as you do with, you know, certain tanks that fail designs. It was a good tank. It was a very good tank, but it was time to modernize, and with that came the M1 Abrams. And, you know, of course, it was sold, exported, thrown into reserves, and you still see a lot of them in service all over the world until they decide to get either, you know, Russian tanks or build their own modern tanks. But it's still definitely out there, still definitely kicking butt, and it's still alive and well today, and that's, you know, pretty rare for a mass-produced 50s tank to see this kind of thing still in production and still going around and doing it. Alright, but let's talk about how it is in War Thunder. Now, like I said in the T10 video, this is one of my favorite two tanks. Because the three late war or post-war tanks that came out were the M-60, T10, and the Leopard. Well, we're going to get into a special Leopard video when I really talk about it, but the Leopard does not come close to what this is. The Leopard's gun is a little better, but the armor is not even close to what you get on the M60. This is a main battle tank. The armor does reflect it. This is not one of those tanks where you can take a shot from the side. You got to think of it as it's a modern tank, but it still has your normal tank failures. It's not the Mouse. It doesn't have an exceptional armor on the side. It's still a tank. It's meant to fight, to have front towards enemy, and that's what you got to remember with this tank. You don't have to angle it. You can just keep your front towards enemy, and it will definitely hold on its own. I've seen the biggest problem is, again, with the gun barrel. The gun barrel will get hit and will get fucked up, and definitely not going to be the greatest day of your life, but it will live. It's got good maneuverability. You can traverse very well. The turret speed, the turret traverse is very good on it. The reload's also exceptional. Has a 50 cal on the roof for aircraft, which can't really turn as much as, you know, the T-54s. Their Dishkas on their roof are usually a little better at shooting down aircraft compared to this, just because of that commander cupola, which actually is really funny because that can actually become dislodged if it does take a hit in real life. The Israelis actually removed a few of them because they were getting dislodged with the commander inside of them because their tank just got hit. But it's a good tank. It's definitely a good tank. It's a good tank to push into an area and just start taking stuff out. The T-54s, if you get a T-54 on your side, you're going to have a bad day, but if a T-54 is in the front, you can definitely duke it out with a T-54, no problem. IS-4s are also the same, IS-3s also the same. But its biggest enemy is the T-10 and the T-54. If the T-54 can get around on your side and get a shot off on you, that's not going to be fun, but you can definitely take toe-to-toe with a T-54, or multiple if it comes from the front. Their gun definitely has a little bit of trouble getting through to you, but you can take some hits, unlike, you know, other tanks. It reminds me of the T-10. The T-10 can take a hit and keep on moving, and so can the M-60. But it's faster, the reload's faster, and it can definitely get more rounds on target than the T-10. So it kind of reminds me of the armor of the T-10, but capable of dealing out so much more damage. Now, the 105mm gun on it isn't really as good. You got a lot of stuff running around with 120 mils. That can do well more penetration, but you definitely kind of, as you get into the medium tanks of the T-54, the armor starts dropping off a little bit, and that's where at least the 105mm can still come into play, especially with the specialized ammo. You can still kind of compete with it. So you don't need the big gun to actually do some damage and kill some shit, which is really, really cool. And, you know, it still sticks into there. It's a good tank. I definitely prefer it over the 103 or any of these other tanks. And of course, you know, everybody's got their no fucking foliage shit. That's the big complaint that I'll be talking about in a later video, about the fact that there's just the foliage issue with this game, because it's just getting ridiculous. But it definitely dishes out the damage, definitely kills a lot of stuff. A really good tank. I do like it as a tier 5. It's definitely a very good tank. Even out to range, it's just insanity. It is an insane, awesome tank. Especially with the heat fence stabilized rounds and the Hesh rounds, it does very, very good. And, you know, these AAA tanks are just ridiculous. But let's go ahead and look under the hood and see what it has. So let's take a look at the M60. Now the M60 features a 105mm gun, which is kind of small compared to a lot of the other stuff, including the T54. Comes in at 46 tons, 750 horsepower, and of course I use knots, so if you're a knots guy like me, it goes 26 knots. Its max angle is about 41 degrees. Turret rotation, 28.2, which is really freaking good. You know, I actually do like the turret rotation speed, even though the Leopard 1 is faster. I feel like with the traverse speed of this, it's a little bit cooler to do. But of course, you know, the reverse speed isn't anywhere near what the Leopard 1 is. So, you know, with the reverse speed of the Leopard 1, you could really get yourself out of some danger. Reload rate, 9.6 seconds. Features a 50 cal on the top for the commander and a 7.62 coax. You know, 50 cal is kind of standard for anything, you know, Korea War and later tanks. So it's actually kind of cool to have, especially when aircraft come strafing through. Let's go ahead and do its armor. Not really anything that great. Right here on the side of the turret, you're getting at about a 30-degree slope, a little more than 30 degrees, 76.2 thickness. So with the effective thickness of 81, and it just gets worse and worse and worse as you go through the back. Your turret's definitely going to be your big, you know, weak spot. And also the commander's little turret, which also with the shrapneling that, you know, with the angling, you might kind of get a ricochet, especially with some of these high velocity armor piercing shells. But if anything, like a heat round hits it, you're going to get right down into the crew compartment with it, which is not going to be cool. You're going to have a bad day. The front is kind of where you're kind of going to get your best bet. You want to keep front towards enemy. 127mm thickness, 220mm effective thickness with a slope of 23 degrees, and it gets even crazier. 247mm effective thickness, going to 180 around there, up to 200. Your lower plate is definitely your best friend, but right here seems to be your kind of weak point. From the side, it's not that good. Like any tank, you don't want to do side shots, and also avoid this area, because this area gets really thick into the turret ring. You really want to avoid a shot right above the tracks. You want to put it right around here. There's some good funky stuff here. If you're really going to take a shot on it, you want to go from the side and try to get these ammo racks right here up in the front, because you really want to stay away from the turret ring. I know a lot of the Russian tanks, the turret ring is really where they're keeping a lot of their ammo, but for this, it's bad news bears. I mean, look at the thickness on it, and you're definitely passing through all of this first. And that. So, I mean, it's not good. The rear, of course, super thin. You don't want to get hit in the rear. So your turret is, you pretty much want to keep your front towards enemy. Angle a little bit, but not too much to get yourself fucked up. There's a lot of ammo in here. With the added armor in the front, these ammo racks are going to be okay, but you don't want them to get hit. This is the worst one right here. You do not want this ammo put in at all. I haven't figured out the ammo counts to actually get this removed, but that's priority. You should definitely get this ammo rack right here removed, and at least focus on these two right here. I would try to keep these two full and get rid of the ones in the front and the one in the turret, because that's bad news. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about guns and stuff and its ammo. Alright, so the thing carries, you got your armor piercing Sabo rounds, which are awesome. 100% chance to ricochet at 18 degrees. At 100 meters, it does 288 millimeters of penetration at 0 degree slope. 30 degree, it's 281 millimeters, and 60 degree, 115 millimeters. Awesome round. Of course, does the, you know, the steel shrapnel effect. Then you got your Hesh Rounds, which are fucking awesome. Now, these are pretty much shaped high explosive charges, high explosive squash head shell. Now, at 100 meters, it does 145 millimeters penetration, 30 degrees, 125 millimeters. Don't worry too much about those stats. This thing will pen anything. Just use it, I'm telling you. Same with the fin-stabilized anti-tank shells. 100 meters, 400 millimeter penetration, 30 degrees, 346 millimeters, and then 60 degrees, 199 millimeters. These are awesome. The only problem with these is if it goes through any piece of foliage. Wow, okay, I didn't really want to load up that much, but sure. If it goes through any piece of foliage, it will detonate before it gets there. It won't actually make a detonation. You won't see it, but you'll be like, why the fuck didn't it hit the tank? That's because as it goes through, the fins actually get destroyed. I haven't seen much on this, but I've been doing a lot of testing with it. and you won't hit the tank. It happens. So definitely avoid shooting through any foliage, fences, anything like that with the fence stabilized heat rounds. Then you got your 12.7 and your 7.62. Can't change out any ammo for it. But overall, awesome tank, and we'll go talk more about it. So in short, Tier 5 comes down to 2 tanks in reality, in my eyes at least. I mean, everybody's got their own personal opinion. It comes down to the T10 and the M60. Now, if you want slow with a little bit more survivability, go for the T10. If you want a good speed main battle tank that can take a beat and keep on kicking, then you're going to go for the M60. It's really no doubt about it. The M60 is one of the finest tanks in the game, personally. Every time I use it, I almost never get one-shotted. I leave with kills every single time. It can definitely dish out the hate pretty well. I mean, even at long range against the T-54s, they're bouncing shots. And you know, even with the fin-stabilized heat rounds and the Hesh rounds, it's fucking them up, man. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If my shooting wasn't so shitty, it would have just smoked everything out there. It's a good tank. It's a really good tank for War Thunder. A lot of people are hating on this late war stuff and this Korea and on to modern day war stuff, but the M60 really is one of those tanks that is just awesome. It's really awesome tank to take out. You know, it reminds me when the mouse first came out, and everybody was like, "Oh, the mouse is so invincible." Well, that's what I feel like when I drive the M60. You feel like such a monster in this tank. And I mean, just bouncing shells like it's its job. This thing is the survivability monster, and definitely try it out. It is an awesome tank. It cannot compare. It really can't.